It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us is Lisa Everett here to talk about NFP Awareness Week. Thank you for being here, Lisa.
Thank you for having me, Kyle.
You are the Director for Marriage Family Ministry for the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend. And when did you first learn about natural family planning?
Well, I was fortunate enough to learn about natural family planning while Fred and I were preparing for marriage many years ago. We'll be married almost 32 years. And I had heard about it when I studied at the John Paul II Institute in Rome. I also heard about it from some friends who were also married, and it really appealed to me in many ways. And I had also, when I was a sophomore at Notre Dame, I had done an ethics research paper on the church's teaching on contraception versus natural family planning, and just really kind of delved into the issue from a lot of perspectives. So I kind of knew about it from a theoretical point of view all the way back in college, but not from a more practical point of view till I was actually preparing for marriage.
And can you explain why the church doesn't allow the use of contraception?
Yes. Well, in a nutshell, we believe that God has joined together the love-giving and life-giving aspects of sex, and that they're truly inseparable. That if we attempt on our own initiative to separate those two meanings, which is what contraception and sterilization would attempt, to suppress the life-giving dimension of sex while keeping the love-giving intact. Number one, that's not possible. They go together. And secondly, we must not separate what God has joined. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one level of the argument or the reason. I think probably the reason that's even more compelling and persuasive, and it was to me when I was studying the issue myself, like I said back in college, was that sex is supposed to be in marriage a sign of the total mutual gift of self between a man and a woman that we pledge on our wedding day, and that we're supposed to be able to renew, so to speak, through that beautiful body language of sexual union. And that contraception or sterilization contradicts the meaning of sex as a sign of total self-giving, because I'm no longer giving myself totally in that act if I have withheld my fertility from my spouse, which is an integral part of my femininity, or if I have asked my spouse or even demanded that he withhold his fertility from me through a condom or some form of sterilization on the man's part. It's no longer accepting him completely as the gift that God created him to be. So even though a couple, of course, doesn't intend to compromise that complete gift of self, that's actually what's going on in contraception. It is, as Pope John Paul II, now St. John Paul II said, contraception is overlaying, in an objective sense, a contradictory language of not giving oneself completely to the other or accepting the spouse completely, whereas sex is supposed to be that sign of total gift of self.
Then how would you explain natural family planning and why that's a better alternative?
Well, obviously, married couples are free to engage in sex whenever we so desire. That's part of the beauty of that vocation. But the point is we have to respect that act in its integrity whenever we choose to engage in it, meaning with the love-giving and life-giving meanings intact and inseparable, and with that complete gift of self that's not been compromised by withholding the gift of fertility. So with natural family planning, it's beautiful because, God has given us women our own body language, which frankly most of us have never been taught how to identify and interpret, in which we can know once we've been instructed, and in conjunction with our husbands, on any given day, whether I am fertile or not, capable of conceiving a child or not. And we can use that knowledge then as a couple to more intentionally achieve a pregnancy by obviously timing relations for the days when conception would be most likely. Or if we have the opposite family planning intention, we have a serious reason, a particular point in our marriage to avoid having a child, then we know the days to avoid intercourse and genital contact, and therefore focus on those days of fertility on expressing our love for each other through one of the other love languages that are really needed for a marriage to grow and thrive. So it's fertility awareness that enables a couple to use the days of fertility to either try to achieve a pregnancy or avoid one. And it has so many benefits. I mean, just on the level of health, while natural family planning methods are as effective as, for example, the hormonal contraceptives like the pill, if a couple is properly instructed in an NFP method and, of course, follows the rules carefully, it can have as high an effectiveness as those hormonal contraceptives, but without any of the side effects, some of which are very serious and can even be life-threatening in terms of cancer risks, etc. And at the same time, once you know as a woman what the biomarkers are in your body that indicate the proper functioning of your reproductive system, NFP is also a way to kind of monitor your gynecological health, because you know right away if something is askew. You know that something is abnormal or whatever it might be, because you know you've been taught to identify what normal looks like. So it not only avoids all those health risks, it actually helps you monitor your reproductive health as a woman. So it's wonderful on that level of health, but it has so many also kind of marriage-building benefits as well, because the kind of virtues that it requires to practice and that you get practice in through your living of the NFP lifestyle, like self-control, shared responsibility, kind of mutual respect, communication in your marriage about kind of at the level of the details and the discipline of using the method, but also those kind of larger and deeper questions. You know, kind of what are we going to do with the fertile period this month? It comes up, that question, in a sense, every month if you're using NFP. So it keeps that dialogue fresh and ongoing, which it should be in a marriage, because as Christian couples, we're trying to let God lead us and to follow His plan for our marriage. And when we can have that kind of dialogue intimately and honestly as a couple, and also as a couple with God, that's what Christian spirituality and marriage is supposed to be all about.
We're talking with Lisa Everett for Natural Family Planning, or NFP Awareness Week. And the way you describe it, it sounds like all it is benefits, and it's better in every way, which I believe and agree, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy necessarily.
No, and notice I did not mention easy
right.
in any of the things I described. But let's face it, the Christian life is not easy. Like, growing in virtue is not easy. So, no, I do not want to give anyone listening a false impression that this is an easy way of life. It is easy to learn for the most part, okay? Meaning it doesn't require like a medical degree to learn these biomarkers. It's just a matter of learning from a competent instructor. So to learn the method is generally easy, but practicing it is not always easy.
Yeah.
Sometimes the signs of fertility can be ambiguous, right? And that's why, just like there's a whole host of spiritualities in the church which kind of appeal to different people, there's a whole lot of NFP methods, you know, some of which appeal to different women or in different circumstances. Some maybe more appeal to them when they're first married, others while they're breastfeeding, and signs can be ambiguous. They might want to look at another. So there's all kinds of methods out there, but also the discipline involved in using the method, just to actually, you know, interpret your biomarkers, to record them, whether that's on an app, which are increasingly popular now than the paper and pencil charting that I grew up with as far as when I was learning NFP as a young married woman. Obviously, if a couple's abstaining during the fertile time because they have a serious reason to avoid a pregnancy, that's a whole other level of self-control and growth in virtue that I'm not going to sugarcoat. It can certainly be a sacrifice, and sometimes a huge one. But what I come to see, and this is what I teach couples when I'm instructing them in the use of NFP in the course of instruction on our own diocese, is, you know, God lets us share as couples in His work of creation, you know, to bring new lives into the world, but also His work of redemption. And something that St. John Paul II said years ago, or wrote years ago in his encyclical on suffering, was that when we unite our small sufferings, and sometimes even our great sufferings, right, with His cross, that there's really nothing more fruitful we can do, and that we're really helping Him in His ongoing work of redemption. So I think it's very helpful as a Christian married couple to see if we have a serious reason to avoid a pregnancy, we're abstaining from days of fertility for maybe cycle after cycle for a while, to unite that suffering that sacrifice entails really with Christ's cross, and to know that in a way that perhaps we will only fully know, you know, in the next life, that sacrifice united with His will be bearing fruit. And so it allows us to be spiritually fruitful as a couple at a time when we couldn't responsibly perhaps be physically fruitful. And so to me, that's a huge way of integrating that abstinence into a spirituality of married life that makes it actually something positive. It doesn't take away the pain, so to speak, or the discipline or the hardship of it, but it gives it a greater value, and we can see that it actually has meaning. And I think it's even on the psychological level helpful to, maybe look at the period of abstinence in a particular cycle and decide as a couple to offer that even for a special intention. Maybe a couple who's struggling to have a child. They're struggling with infertility, or someone is struggling with a serious illness or needs work, or, goodness knows how many intentions there are in all of our lives, let alone on a global scale. And it's part of the Paschal mystery, we believe as Christians, that from those kinds of deaths to self that sacrifice entails, God always gives new life in some fashion. And that we can be participating in that Paschal mystery in that kind of mini way in our marriage. And how beautiful that is to go through our married life thinking of uniting all of our struggles and sacrifices, and including those involved in the practice of NFP with Christ's cross for his ongoing work of redemption.
Well, one of the things that we wanted to make sure we talk to you about is the opportunities that are available in the diocese to learn about NFP. And so for anybody who is saying, oh, man, I should be looking into this, what kind of things are available?
Sure. Now, we have, again, for a diocese our size, we have a lot of options. And there are more and more online offerings as well. But I would encourage any of your listeners, Kyle, to go to our office webpage. Go to the diocesan website, which is www.diocesefwsb.org, and go to, it's still listed, I believe, under Office of Family Life. And then on our page, just hit the bar on the right-hand side for natural family planning. It will give you a list of all of the classes we teach as a diocese, and you can register online right there and pay. It also lists all of the other NFP providers in our diocese and their contact information as well. So we have instructors in the Couple-to-Couple League, which is a symptothermal method of natural family planning, the Creighton model, which is a mucus-only method, and any other listings. There's also some local smaller groups that offer instruction in our diocese as well. So all that information is listed on our diocesan webpage. And I would also call your listeners' attention to the fact that increasingly, couples are doing more and more online. And so the NFP community has kind of moved in that direction as well. So there are more and more online options for learning NFP in the convenience of your own home on your own schedule. So, for example, the Couple-to-Couple League has a self-paced online course as well as a live online course that couples can register for and learn NFP without even having to leave their home. So, and you would just Google Couple-to-Couple League and find that information on the web too. So it's never been easier to learn NFP and never more convenient. Plus, there are many, many apps that have been developed now to, again, make the recording of those biomarkers and the so-called charting easier than ever. So it seems in some ways there's kind of a bandwagon in our society of moving towards a more natural means of everything, whether that's organic food and, lowering the use of additives and pesticides and all kinds of things like that. And NFP fits into that movement of the cycles of nature and learning what they are, respecting them, and living in accordance with them, and not kind of polluting our internal environment with all kinds of things that aren't necessary and that can really endanger our health.
All right. Well, encourage people to check out the website that you mentioned. All the links can be found there, diocesefwsb.org. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us today and sharing a little bit about NFP for Natural Family Planning Awareness Week.
Thank you, Kyle.